After Alina passed, I never mentioned the house in Sanibel to my son. 3 months later, I understood why my instincts told me to stay silent. I raised Gatsby with my own hands after his mother left us when he was 7. Taught him to throw a baseball, helped him through college, watched him marry Scarlett with tears in my eyes. For 38 years, he was the center of my world. But grief makes people reveal themselves in unexpected ways. Within weeks of burying Alina, my son began circling our family home like a stranger appraising property. The boy I loved was calculating my worth before I was even gone. I am 76 years old. A retired high school English teacher who spent 43 years helping teenagers understand Shakespeare and Steinbeck. Alina and I lived in the same house for 51 years. The white colonial on Maple Street with the wraparound porch and her prize-winning rose garden. When she died last March, something inside me broke that I knew would never heal properly. But I thought my son would help hold the pieces together. I was wrong. 3 weeks after we buried Alina, Gatsby showed up at my door with a briefcase and that smile he used to flash when asking for money in college. He let himself in without knocking. Old habit, he said. He spread papers across Alina's kitchen table, the same table where she used to clip coupons and write grocery lists in her careful handwriting. Dad, we need to talk about your situation. My situation, as if losing the woman I loved for 5 decades was a problem to be solved with paperwork. He pulled out photographs of smaller houses. Ranch-style homes with wheelchair ramps and grab bars in the bathrooms. Places designed for people who were dying slowly. The stairs here are getting dangerous, he said, pointing toward the second floor where Alina and I had slept for half a century. And this house is too much work for someone your age. Someone your age. The phrase sat heavy in the room. I listened as he explained how the housing market was strong, how a fresh start might be good for me. How he'd already spoken to a real estate agent about fair market value. Already spoken to someone, without asking me. That night, I couldn't sleep in the bed Alina and I had shared. I walked through our house in the darkness, touching things that held our history. The banister Gatsby had slid down as a boy. The kitchen window where Alina watched birds every morning with her coffee. I found myself in his old bedroom. Still decorated with baseball trophies and high school photographs. Pictures of the three of us at Christmas mornings and summer vacations, when we were a family that trusted each other completely. The next morning, I noticed small things I had missed before. Mail that didn't make it to my hands. Phone calls Gatsby took in another room. The way Scarlett looked at our antique furniture like she was making mental calculations. When I asked about a missing bank statement, Gatsby said he was helping organize my finances, making sure nothing got overlooked during this difficult time. Such thoughtful words, such careful concern. But I started paying attention in ways I hadn't since Alina got sick. I watched how Gatsby moved through our house now, not like a son visiting his childhood home, like someone taking inventory. 2 weeks later, I found him in Alina's bedroom. He was measuring the windows with a yellow tape measure. When he saw me standing in the doorway, he said he was thinking about better curtains for when I sold the house. When I sold the house, not if. A business card fell from his shirt pocket as he fumbled to put the tape measure away. Hartwell Real Estate, Premium Properties. I picked it up and handed it back to him. Just getting some preliminary information, he said, for when you're ready. But his face was red, his hands were shaking slightly. That evening, Scarlett called to invite me for Sunday dinner. She mentioned a lovely assisted living community she'd heard about. Beautiful grounds, she said, wonderful staff, people my own age to talk with, people my own age. There was that phrase again. During dinner, I watched them exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The way couples communicate without words when they're planning something together. Hermione, my 16-year-old granddaughter, barely spoke to me. She used to chatter about school and friends and boys she liked. Now she picked at her food and avoided my eyes. After dessert, I heard Gatsby and Scarlett talking quietly in the kitchen while I played chess with Hermione. She was distracted, losing pieces she would normally protect. "Grandpa," she said suddenly, "are you really getting sick?" The question hit me like cold water. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Dad said you're having trouble remembering things. That you might need special help soon." I looked at this girl I'd taught to ride a bicycle and helped with homework for years. She was studying my face like she was looking for signs of the confusion her father had described. "I remember everything that matters," I told her, but I could see she didn't believe me anymore. That night, I sat in my study surrounded by books I'd collected over decades of teaching. Alina's reading chair sat empty beside mine. This room had always been our sanctuary. Now it felt like a place I was borrowing time in. I thought about the secret Alina and I had kept for 3 years. The little house in Sanibel with the screened porch and the view of the Gulf. Our surprise for the family. Our retirement dream that became something else entirely when cancer took her before we could enjoy it together. The house nobody knew about except the two of us. Maybe Alina had been wiser than I realized when she insisted we keep it quiet. Maybe she understood something about family that I was only beginning to learn. Trust, once broken, changes the shape of everything that comes after. The phone call that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in June. I was watering Alina's roses when I heard Gatsby's voice through the kitchen window. He thought I was napping upstairs. The appraisal came back higher than expected, he said to someone, 430,000, more than enough to cover everything. I stopped watering, the hose dripped onto my shoes. No, he doesn't suspect anything. We've been careful about that. My hands went numb, the hose fell from my grip, I walked inside quietly. Gatsby was pacing near the refrigerator with his phone pressed to his ear. His back was turned to me. Scarlett already toured 3 facilities. The one in Brookhaven has an opening next month. Once we get him settled, we can list the house immediately. Get him settled, like I was a piece of furniture being moved to storage. I backed out of the kitchen before he could see me. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might wake the neighbors. That afternoon, I drove to the library and used their computer. I searched for Gatsby's construction company online. What I found made my stomach turn cold. 3 lawsuits, unpaid contractors, a business loan in default. My son was drowning financially, and I was his life preserver. The next week, I followed him. Something I never thought I would do to my own child. He drove to a law office downtown, stayed for 2 hours. When he came out, he was carrying a folder marked Power of Attorney. I sat in my car across the street, watching my son plan my future without me. That evening, Scarlett called to check on me. Such a sweet voice, such caring questions about my health and my memory. You know, Dad, she said, if you ever feel confused or overwhelmed, you should tell us immediately. We want to help. The word had taken on new meaning. I started keeping track of things after that. Phone calls that ended when I entered rooms. Mail that disappeared before I could read it. Conversations between Gatsby and Scarlett that stopped mid-sentence when they noticed me listening. They were building a case, piece by piece, creating evidence that I needed their intervention. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I couldn't sleep, so I went downstairs for warm milk. Alina used to make it for me when nightmares kept me awake. Through the living room window, I saw a car parked across the street. Gatsby's car. I turned off all the lights and watched. He was sitting behind the wheel talking on his phone. At 1 in the morning. I'm telling you there are signs, he said loudly enough for me to hear through his open window. He left the stove on yesterday, couldn't remember where he put his glasses, they were on his head. Lies, all lies. The cognitive decline is obvious to anyone who spends time with him. Getting power of attorney is just protecting him from himself at this point. I stood there in my dark living room, listening to my son destroy my reputation with carefully crafted fiction. He's not the man he used to be, Gatsby continued. It's heartbreaking really, but we have to think about what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone? Translation, what's best for Gatsby's bank account? I watched him drive away, then sat in Alina's reading chair until sunrise. The house felt different now, like a place I was already losing. The next morning, I called my old friend Robert Martinez. We taught together for 20 years before he became a school principal. More importantly, he'd become a lawyer after retirement. I need advice about protecting myself, I told him. We met at a coffee shop downtown. I explained everything while Robert took notes on a yellow legal pad. They're being very careful, he said when I finished. Everything they're doing is legal if they can prove you're incapacitated. But I'm not incapacitated. I know that. You know that, but if 3 people testify that you're showing signs of dementia, and if there are documented incidents of confusion or forgetfulness, a judge might side with them. The coffee in my cup went cold while I absorbed this. What can I do? Robert leaned forward. Document everything, keep a journal of your daily activities, take pictures with timestamps, prove you're mentally sharp. And if that's not enough, then you disappear before they can file the paperwork. Disappear. The word echoed in my mind as I drove home. That evening, I sat in my study looking at the brass key Alina had given me 3 years ago, the key to our secret house in Sanibel. The place we'd bought with money from her mother's estate, hidden in a trust with Alina's maiden name. For emergencies, she'd said when we signed the papers, sometimes you need a place where nobody can find you. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. Alina always had a flair for the theatrical. Now I understood she'd been preparing for a war I didn't know was coming. I opened the manila envelope she'd left in our bedroom safe. Copies of the deed, the trust documents, the utility accounts, all in the name of Alina Catherine Morrison, her maiden name, a ghost house owned by a ghost person. My escape route had been waiting for me all along. The next week, Gatsby announced he was taking a few days off work to spend more time with me. Such a devoted son, such genuine concern for his aging father. But I watched him watching me, taking mental notes of every conversation. Every moment of confusion he could later exaggerate into evidence. He was building his case methodically, patiently, and I was building mine. The morning they came for me, I was ready. Gatsby arrived at 8:30 with 2 witnesses and a briefcase full of documents. I recognized one of the witnesses, Mrs. Chen from next door. She'd known me for 15 years, but today she looked at me with pity instead of warmth. The other witness was a man in a gray suit I'd never seen before. He introduced himself as a notary public. His handshake was firm and professional, the kind of handshake that seals important decisions. "Dad, we've talked about this," Gatsby said as he spread papers across Alina's dining room table. "These documents just formalize what we already discussed." What we already discussed. I didn't remember discussing anything. But that was the point, wasn't it? I shuffled to the table slowly. Let my hand shake slightly as I reached for my reading glasses. The performance had begun. "What am I signing exactly?" I asked, making my voice sound uncertain. "Just some paperwork to help us take care of things for you," Scarlett said gently. She'd arrived 10 minutes after the others. Her smile was warm and reassuring, the smile of someone doing the right thing. The first document was a power of attorney. The second was a medical directive. The third authorized them to make financial decisions on my behalf. My entire life signed away in triplicate. I picked up the pen with trembling fingers. Let them see an old man who needed their guidance. Let them believe they were saving me from myself. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Gatsby pointed to the signature lines. His voice was gentle, patient. "The way you speak to children and people whose minds have begun to fade." I signed my name carefully on each document. The same signature I'd used to sign report cards and mortgage papers and love letters to Alina. Now I was using it to surrender my independence. The notary stamped each page with official finality. Mrs. Chen signed as a witness, her pen moving quickly across the paper. She avoided looking at me directly. "There," Gatsby said when it was finished. "Now you don't have to worry about any of this anymore." Don't have to worry, because I couldn't be trusted to worry about my own life. After they left, I sat alone in the dining room looking at the copies they'd given me. Legal documents that made me a ward of my own son. Papers that said I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was helpless. That afternoon, I walked through the house one final time. I touched the banister Gatsby had carved his initials into when he was 12. I stood in the kitchen where Alina had made thousands of meals for our family. I sat on our bed and remembered 51 years of conversations whispered in the darkness. Then I began to pack, not everything, that would raise suspicion. Just the things that mattered most. Alina's jewelry, our wedding album, the brass key to the house in Sanibel, a few changes of clothes. I moved slowly, carefully, an old man putting his affairs in order. The hardest part was Alina's rose garden. I'd promised to tend it after she died. But roses can survive without constant attention. Sometimes they grow stronger when left alone. I filled a small bag with tools from the garage. Basic things I might need in Florida: a hammer, a screwdriver, electrical tape. The kind of supplies that help you start over. That evening, Gatsby called to check on me, such a caring son. Such genuine concern about my first day under their protection. "How are you feeling about everything, Dad?" "Relieved," I told him, and it was the truth. I spent the night writing letters, one for Gatsby, one for Hermione. One for the neighbors who would wonder where I'd gone. I kept the letters simple. Explained that I needed time away from the house where Alina and I had been so happy. Said I was staying with an old friend in Florida. Asked them not to worry. None of it was technically a lie. The next morning, I loaded my car before sunrise, 2 suitcases and a box of photographs. Everything else I was leaving behind. I placed Gatsby's letter on the kitchen counter where he would find it. Weighted it down with Alina's favorite coffee mug, the one that said "World's Best Wife" in faded blue letters. My hands were steady as I locked the front door. The house key went under the flower pot where we'd always kept a spare. Some habits die hard. I drove east toward the interstate as the sun came up behind me. In the rearview mirror, I watched our neighborhood shrink to nothing. 43 years of teaching, 51 years of marriage, 76 years of life in one place. All of it disappearing behind me. The Florida house was exactly as Alina and I had left it 3 years ago, white shutters and a screened porch facing the Gulf. Palm trees that rustled in the salt breeze. A place where nobody knew my name or my story. I carried my suitcases inside and set them down in the living room. Sunlight streamed through windows we'd never gotten to enjoy together. The furniture was covered with white sheets like ghosts of the life we'd planned to live. My phone rang, Gatsby's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 20 minutes later, then again an hour after that. Each unanswered call was a small victory. Each silence was proof that I still controlled something in my life. By evening, there were 7 missed calls. 7 attempts to locate their missing asset. 7 reminders that I was supposed to be helpless now. I sat on the porch watching pelicans dive into the surf. The sun was setting over water that stretched to the horizon, endless and free. Tomorrow, Gatsby would discover I was gone. He'd find the letter and realize that his helpless father had outsmarted him completely. But tonight, I was just a man watching the ocean. A man who'd kept one secret that saved his life. Alina had always been the smart one in our marriage. Even in death, she was still protecting me. The first call came at 6 in the morning, 3 days after I'd settled into the Florida house. Gatsby's name flashed on the screen like an emergency signal. I watched it ring until it stopped. The voicemail was frantic. "Dad, where are you? Your neighbor saw you loading your car. The letter doesn't make sense. What friend? Call me back immediately." I deleted it without finishing. By noon, there were 12 missed calls. Gatsby, Scarlett, even Hermione. My granddaughter's voice was small and worried on her message. "Grandpa, please call us. We're scared something happened to you." That one almost broke my resolve. Almost. I spent the afternoon on the porch reading a book Alina had packed in her nightstand 3 years ago, a mystery novel she never got to finish. The salt air turned the pages soft under my fingers. My phone buzzed with text messages I didn't read. Notifications I ignored. Somewhere up north, my family was discovering that the helpless old man they'd manipulated had disappeared completely. The irony was perfect. They'd spent months convincing everyone I couldn't take care of myself. Now they had to explain how someone that incompetent had vanished without a trace. On the 4th day, I drove to the local grocery store. Bought supplies like a man planning to stay indefinitely. Milk, bread, coffee. The cashier was a young woman with kind eyes who called me honey and asked if I needed help carrying bags. Nobody here knew I was supposed to be helpless. That evening, I finally listened to one of Gatsby's voicemails. "The police can't file a missing person report because you left voluntarily. Your bank account shows no unusual activity." "Dad, I don't understand what you're trying to prove." What I was trying to prove. Even now, he thought this was about making a point instead of saving my life. Week 2 brought a different kind of call. Robert Martinez, my lawyer friend, phoned to tell me Gatsby had contacted him. "Your son is very worried," Robert said carefully. "He's asking if I know where you are." "What did you tell him?" "That attorney-client privilege works both ways." "But Atticus, he's talking about hiring a private investigator." "Let him hire whoever he wanted." The Florida house existed in a legal maze Alina had constructed like a master puzzle, trusts within trusts. Corporate entities that led nowhere. A paper trail designed to disappear. By month 3, the calls became less frequent. My phone would ring once or twice a week instead of constantly. The desperation in the voicemails shifted to something else. Anger. "This is ridiculous, Dad. You're acting like a child. We were trying to help you and you know it. Trying to help." The same words they'd used while planning to sell my house and warehouse me in assisted living. I learned later, through Robert, that they'd sold the family home within 6 weeks of my disappearance. The $430,000 Gatsby had mentioned in his phone call got split between paying his debts and purchasing a bigger house for his own family. They'd gotten exactly what they wanted, except for me. The thing about betrayal is how it changes your relationship to memory. I found myself remembering moments with Gatsby differently now. His occasional impatience when Alina was sick. The way he'd calculated the cost of her medical bills. Small signs I'd dismissed as stress but now recognized as something colder. Maybe I'd been naive. Maybe love had made me blind to who my son really was. Or maybe people reveal their true selves only when money becomes scarce and options become desperate. 6 months after leaving, I got a call from Hermione. She'd somehow gotten my number from someone. Her voice was older than I remembered. "Grandpa, I miss you. I didn't know what they were planning. I thought you were really getting sick." This was the conversation I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "I miss you too, sweetheart. Are you ever coming back?" I looked out at the Gulf where dolphins played in the evening light. The question deserved an honest answer. "I don't think so." She cried a little on the phone, 16 years old and caught between her grandfather and her parents, another casualty of her father's choices. "I could visit you," she said finally. "When I turn 18, if you wanted me to. I would love that more than anything." After we hung up, I sat on the porch until the stars came out. The sound of waves had become the soundtrack to my new life. Rhythm and peace I'd never expected to find. A year later, I got word through Robert that Gatsby and Scarlett had divorced. Financial stress, according to the rumors. Turns out selling your father's house doesn't solve deeper problems. It just reveals them. I felt no satisfaction in this news. Only sadness for the family we might have been if greed hadn't poisoned everything. These days, I wake up when I want to wake up, eat breakfast when I'm hungry. Read books Alina would have loved. Take walks on the beach where nobody asks about my memory or my ability to live independently. The brass key sits on my kitchen table next to a photograph of Alina. She's laughing in the picture, her head thrown back with pure joy, the way she looked when life surprised her with something wonderful. I think she would approve of my escape. She always said the best surprises were the ones nobody saw coming. My phone still rings sometimes. Gatsby's name still appears on the screen, but I've learned the power of silence. The freedom that comes from choosing who gets access to your life. Some secrets are meant to be kept. Some disappearances are actually discoveries. And sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones you need to hide from. The sun is setting now over water that stretches beyond the horizon. Tomorrow I'll tend the small garden I've planted behind the house. Eleanor's favorite flowers growing in soil she never touched but somehow blessed. This is my life now, hidden but not lost. Protected by the wisdom of a woman who loved me enough to prepare an escape route I never thought I'd need. The last laugh belongs to those who keep their best secrets until the very end.